You're all set. There's so much paper.
Good evening. I'd like to call the committee of the whole of the village board of Shorewood to order at 6:31. We have a forum at 5 with trustees Ursink and Arndorfer on their way. And we have one item on the agenda this evening, a long-range financial plan presentation. And for that, I will turn it over to Director Towson.
All right, today we are going to go over a review of the 2024-2033 long-range financial plan. We are doing an overview of pages 3 through 19, and we're going to touch on 21 and 22. We will start off with page 3, debt service.
Excuse me. Trustee Stockton?
Do you want us to wait it until the end for questions or as we go?
I'm gonna try to make it through as quick as possible. I would rather just take the questions all at once. All right, page 3, debt service starts out, just an overview. Line 1 would be existing debt. Line 2 is projected tax levy debt for the service needs. Line 4 and 5 show the year-to-year change in debt service. Line 6 show calculated estimated debt service portion for tax levy per household. If you look down, as mentioned as in the memo sent out, line 7 shows the calculated tax levy for debt service. You'll also see on there the stabilization cap change from the 5 to the 10% for future tax increases on debt service. Lines 9 through 12 is the remaining funds to meet those debt stabilization efforts. If you look at line 11, those are the anticipated revenue inflows for the repayment of previous general funds, advances to the water and sewer utilities. Based on projections, looks like we'll meet the need of the debt stabilization around the year 2025. You can see that on line 10. We go to page 4. Page 4 shows a chart for the village's general obligation debt capacity trends in relation to the state limits, outstanding to the 5% equalized values. And we can pass over to page 6. Page 5 is pretty much just a stretch out of the narrative, gives you a little bit more background and detail. But we'll go to page 6 here. Based on a moderate tax levy model of a 2% annual growth tax levy, annual operations of a 5% cap on the increase of tax levy to support the debt service. Lines 11 will show the anticipated reserve levy limit capacity for the village over this planning period. Also stated in the memo, if you look at line 6, it'll be noted that for planning purposes, we do not adapt any future growth factors outside of the current year planning. We will slide over to page 7. Page 7 will key in on lines 13 and 16 for the calculation of the moderate levy. Line 13 is the stabilized tax levy needed for debt service, and 14 is the 2% annual increase for levy operations for capital used. 13 and 14 total together gives us that number for the moderate levy on line 10. At the bottom of the sheet, 26 through 29, calculations show the projected changes in taxes for the homes based on the price of 340,000. Lines 30 through 33 shows the value of pending tax relief that would be generated by the TID districts when they close there in the future. We can go on to page 8. Page 8, from a planning perspective, this schedule shows a collective budgetary funding gaps that could result under the moderate levy model. These gaps happen since expenditures are projected to rise faster than other non-tax revenues in this planning model. Page 9. These for page 9 is just the annual capital projects. Those are the 9 infrastructures. The long-range plan projects are the infrastructure. Look at page 9, it just gives you in better detail a description of those two. So we can go to page 10. 10, the most keynote here is line 2. We use a 2% growth factor for property taxes. Actual equipment and project costs are likely to rise at rates higher than this model projected. So these are just estimates. So plug as we go in the future. And then for our next 3 pages, pages 11, 12, and 13, are our TID projections, cash flow projections into the long-range financial plan. It looks like these TIDs are all still trending to close at their mandated, well before their mandated close date. And then we can move on to the utility section, starting on page 14. 14 also gives a greater detailed narrative behind these utilities. Just want to note here that you'll see that we use a opposite year approach when increasing any utility rates from year to year to not complicate things. If we bounce to page 15 of the water utility, page 15 provides some general information related to the village's water utility. Of note, of most recent, you'll see a 20% increase from July 1, 2023. Future projects are also showing that we'll likely need another 20% increase in 2025 and additional increases there in the future for this utility to remain self-sufficient. As a reference to some of those water utility projects, you can look on page 21. And we can go on to the sewer utility, which would land us on page 17. Same for sewer utility. As of to note, you'll see that the projected 2024 rate increase has increased to 25% from the original 10% that we had projected last year. And that is due to the reserved, the revised cost estimates for the sewer project that will stretch from 2024 to 2033. And page 18 is a comparative utility rate sheet constructed of 20 municipalities near us to give us cost reference across the board from water, sewer, storm quarter over quarter. Then you have appendix A and B with our projects implementation schedules. And that is page 21 and 22. You can see the projects that we have out going from 2024 to 33. Any questions?
One just kind of broad question.
Yeah.
Did we make any assumptions when putting this together? On how it might change with the shared revenue increases and potential sales tax increase in the county?
We have not, only because the information is still not clear enough for us yet.
Okay.
And I think any change would, I read somewhere it would be 2025.
Okay, I just didn't know if we like built in like a, hey, maybe there's gonna be a little bit of extra money
Use your
in the
mic.
planning process. Oh,
There you go.
I just didn't know if we'd consider like, hey, we might have more money somewhere in the planning process, but I know it's a ways away, so I was just curious.
Just want to know, trustee Urson came in, and then, trustee Earl will not be here this evening for either.
I have a footprint,
Trustee Ren.
regarding the water rate increases, that 20% every year. Is that mostly due to like the lead pipe replacement program? Is that the main driving thing? I'm assuming there's some increase over time in general, but just 20%. That's a big jump, so.
Yes, it is, is there the placeholder for us to cover those estimated costs for that replacement?
Okay. Sorry, one more question. This is more general. With regards to the TIDs, and those are closing early, which is great. The last one that closed, we extended it for 1 year. Just from the legislative perspective, is that something that's allowed on every TID?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I believe the procedure is, I mean, this is off topic, but there is a point at which we are, asked to, consider a resolution to extend on.
Okay.
Yes, trustee Krueger.
Can we go to, definitely that's. If you go to page 7, line 29. Can you walk us through the change from prior year, these percentages? So we're looking at 4.1, 3.3, so on and so forth,
What line was it in these?
29.
Okay.
So village only tax rate, and it looks like we're sitting pretty close until 26 and 27. Can you walk us through this, please?
Past 2025, I would have to get back to you on that one to get some additional information to fully answer that.
Okay, that's just, it's a large percentage increase.
That's good. I got you.
Okay, appreciate it.
Just on that, because that is the drought at 28, that's the TID closing, right? So then the money goes back in, so that accounts for the drought, but then I had this a similar question. That's okay.
Thanks. Are there any restrictions on the percentage increase we can have? I was under the impression that there was a,
Yeah, there are levy limits, and so that's the part, well, I'll let Director Johnson comment on that. But also, this is where debt stabilization might come in, where if we have reserves, that we can stabilize that increase so that there is that kind of aspect, but we probably haven't calculated that.
I mean, I would be interested to see sort of this portion of this graph fleshed out a little bit. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I don't know whether it's in this plan, but in the past, we've had graphs where it shows where bonds are kind of coming online and stacking, so sometimes that can show visually really easily, kind of like the age of the different bonds, and then, and that can create those spikes as well, and that's where we, again, started with the debt stabilization, so that, you know, the taxpayers. So we can make a note to come back to it.
Yeah, I mean, George can definitely review and respond, but when you look at the project schedule, it's, you know, driven by the construction costs from the Public Works facility. That's scheduled right now for 20 million in 2026.
Oh, that's right.
So the rest of the project schedules, as you look at the subtotals, and what I'm looking at is actually Appendix A. So that's when we are looking to see kind of where things are falling, that spike seems to correlate. But again, I'll let Director Johnson review that, but that's what my inclination would be, and what look at the numbers that he's been producing, that's always been cognizant in my mind, primarily because that's a moving date. You know, that's not a hard date.
All that. I didn't have my paper copy when I was going through, so I remember seeing that.
Sure.
But I didn't make note of it. And I do recall from the last time we looked at the LRP that there was like a $5 million
Mhm.
placeholder to that project, and now now that we've gotten those big, 100-foot numbers,
Mhm.
that's in 20 million, so that's the big impact.
That's what was really great about George running through the information this year, because it really put into perspective as we plan for the future where we want to be focused on, where those peaks fall in, and how they may impact our planning as we go into next year. Also, to just reflect a little bit on Jerry's question with regards to the water utility, George laid out in his memo just to really show the impact of some of the lead service lateral program is beyond anything we will have ever seen, really, with the water utility. So you're, from a dollar perspective, you're looking over the next 10 years to increase from 17 million last year to 39 million. So that kind of, when you talk about the percentages and increases, that's where those numbers are being driven from.
Decide not to.
Correct. We're no longer leasing on private property for purposes of the utility. So that's a budgetary change that you're going to see. Those parking utilities fall into the 2024 budget. They're actually going to be embedded within the operating budget. So that's a change that is made based upon the prior policy decisions and changes in our parking requirements. Great question, though. Thank you.
So I'm wondering. Why would you all in favor of limiting debt service tax levy increases to 5% a year instead of 10? So I really want to know why we're going to 10. Number 7 on page 3. The previous years, it's been only 5%.
The increase was noted because when we were doing our calculations, this year, the 5% put us well under the needed budgetary amount. We were negative by 2025, and the 10% was kind of the soft number that kept us from being negative.
It's a huge increase, right?
Yeah,
We doubled it.
yeah, any number short of that 10%, it may have fixed one year, but would have been right back negative within the short period.
That's how aggressive this. capital spending is.
Yeah,
Okay, on page 8, I just noticed that we didn't have, previously we had a effective funding gap, which we didn't have this year, which was kind of helpful. It was the red at the bottom, it showed us what we needed.
did you say what that was called again?
It was called the prospective funding gap, but it was red at the bottom, and it showed us how short we were, from the last one.
I can
It just.
pull the previous one and try to get you that calculation later.
Okay,
Just go through. Gaps.
maybe it's somewhere else and I missed it. It's possible.
Yeah. I can't remember what page. What page is
It was on the bottom of the chart in previous years, it was the bottom that. From 8,
Wonder if I got cut off.
So you're just looking for the equation, it's not even needed.
Oh, okay.
I guess I should be looking at myself, but, you know.
Anything that's appears, you're just like a different report.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The gap was, the gap immediately being, happened.
Oh, it's on page 8, the, yeah. So there's a narrative,
Expected funding gap.
for operational forecast.
Moving on to page 10, number 9 there. Other revenues. So in previous years, we had MMSD and other grants as other revenues there, but we don't have them this year. And I'm wondering, do we not anticipate any MMSD or other grants? I mean, those can be significant. I think they can be tens of thousands of dollars. The other thing that makes me really nervous is, well, there's many things that make me nervous here. So we get a $3,300,000 other revenues in 2026. Is that, what is that?
What page are you on?
What's it for?
Page
10.
page 10, line 9. Column 26.
So previously, last year, that item was $2 million. Anyway, I'm curious, where do we get $3 million from? And maybe it's just, something that should be allocated or renamed or something. But obviously, the funding here, 25 million, it jumps up to, oh, I'm sorry.
I think that's the TID funding,
Yeah.
26, based on the appendix,
Oh,
the project.
yep.
implementation schedule.
That's North Oakland Avenue.
Pardon?
That's North Oakland Avenue,
So that's from.
correct? Yeah, so TID, that TID 5 is gonna stay open until conclusion of the construction of that roadway. And, the costs for that, because they're now done with, design. You seem more accurate.
Million is. That line 8, 26 was only $2 million. And this year it's 25 million. And that's, again, because of the timing of all these projects.
So, yeah, and that the 2026 year also directly correlates to, assume that you're gonna be constructing a public works facility in that year. That goes back to the same increase question from trustee Kudo before, why the spike in that one year?
Whatever does need to be used. Make sure that spike is.
Yeah, yes.
Then on page 19, I went to the beginning, struck by. taking over the previous year for the average residential property owner payments. So last year, when we were projecting for, say, 2027, now we have 12.48%. Before we put in the DPW, the 23 million, and the streetlights, that was only 1.6. I mean, it's glaring, you know,
Mhm.
the aggressive construction is taking, it's a big financial hit. I noticed on one page, we had, a DPW placeholder of 5 million on page 42, but we're dropping that down to 3. That's the proposal, right?
Correct, and this, I want to say it was at the last meeting, but it actually kind of showed you how we forecast when you lean into construction facility costs that are estimated each year. So those same projections were utilized within the scope of this chart for project implementation.
So on page 42, that should be 3 million placeholder.
Correct, I don't believe that Public Works may have updated that number. Correct, we have been, ever since that policy was enacted in I want to say 2017. But we increase that household value based upon the average that comes back from the assessment rules.
So that should be a 340.
Correct, we just don't go and change the policy at the time, we update it within the LRP.
Get a feel for the debt here. Tried to do some quick research and I couldn't find the number, but I'm thinking out of our cash flow every year, it's at least 50,000. This is not a bonding issue, it's just another debt thing to be aware of. I guess I'm curious about, we've talked about Capitol Drive pedestrian safety improvements, and I don't see anything here for that. And I know some residents have submitted a proposal and they've been told you need to put it in the long range financial plan because it would be, you know, cost.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering what we can do about that here.
Yeah, I'm happy that you brought that up because I think in the past, people have referred to the long-range financial plan and that would not be the avenue. Typically, when you're gonna put that within the scope of a capital budget. If you do those improvements, just because the cost of those aren't as significant to necessitate bonding, or at least depending on what it was, I wouldn't suggest that you use that percentage on your borrowing for something like that. So that would fall within the scope of a capital budget.
Okay, so I should just tell that person that she would just misinform.
My understanding is that when they've referenced the LRP before, that it was really in reference to the capital budget. So I think it's just a clarification. I don't have any cost to respond to in terms of what that would be. So for me, it's a business decision on what dollar amount that is, and then how it will qualify for bonding versus qualifying for insertion in the capital budget. So no, at this time, absent a cost, no, it would not be appropriate within this document. Okay, well, First of all, it's a clarification of referencing the capital budget, which is just a change of language. So that's number one. Number two, residents don't make policy decisions within to the LRP and to the capital budget. That is a board discussion. So if there is a specific project that we're looking at that can be vetted and have costs assigned from them, we don't put general numbers, and we try not to put generalized numbers within to the capital budget because you're levying that next year for those improvements. So you want to try to have, as best as you can, a very well thought out product in terms of, you know, that usually has to go through Public Works, or they obtain, you know, quotes and bids and ramp up to something like that.
There's, to get you out of the middle, an email to the village manager for clarification would be most direct, and then you could, if it's, whether it's a department head or whatnot.
I guess I thought that placeholders were estimates, you know, and that's what we've done for a lot of things in the placeholders.
I'm hearing this, what the information is.
Yeah, for a capital, I'm not gonna mince with words, but I've shared. There you go.
So I think the revenue can certainly follow up with the village manager and then any department head needs to be, and if it's pertaining to the proposals that are coming out of the Parks and Open Spaces now, that will be part of the review. She should contact Rebecca. Sure.
We have a process that we utilize with the traffic request form. It's on our website now, and we have people submit through that, and that's,
If I may, I think this is could we just take it off on sure and go back? We established that it's not gonna change.
I guess my final point is, when I look at I have a couple of concerns about the London financial plan. It's the timing of literally slamming so many big projects so fast. I think I question the wisdom of doing so for staff. And I question the wisdom of doing so for taxpayers, and I wonder if we could adjust the timing. If it'd be wise to adjust some of the timing here. It's not in here, but I believe that staff has recommended that we use the Monsanto money for continuing engineering stuff for Public Works. What about, I really talked about the availability of TID funds from TID 3 for that work.
the TID funds, that's for purposes of facilitating additional development. And we're not at a point where we know that that would actually be occurring on the current public works site.
So we can't use it, even though we know whether we go or we stay. We need environmental studies, we need the wall taken care of.
Mhm.
We cannot use TID money, whether we go or we stay, we can't use TID money for those things.
If we stay, it would be a public facility, which would be non-tax revenue generating. It's not within the scope of the project plan that was initially outlined for TID 3.
Can you amend the plan?
You can't amend it. I don't know if that would qualify. Something I can look into, but my understanding with how it's laid out is because the I think a part of, let me just take the conversation just for some perspective, one step further. When TID project plans are put together, those project construction costs are then used to develop that pro forma to see how the TID will pay for itself. And then generate additional increment for the community. So if the TID needs to be able to perform and pay for those improvements within that scope and period of time.
So like we're using money. Again.
Correct, but Oakland Avenue was an identified project improvement at the time that it was created in the project plan. Pardon me.
To me, I question the wisdom of putting so many projects so heavily. I question the morale of staff, communication with residents and electeds. and the wisdom of taking on so much debt so fast and such big projects for the size of our village. Our taxes are already so high. I'd like to see these projects spread out.
Do you have any, specific recommendations within that?
Well, I'd like to see probably maybe move the public works to after the streetlights are done. And then after that, I think we need to start talking about the growings after we finish public works, whatever happens. I feel like a lot of things are in flux here now because part of the state budget, I believe, includes incentives for collaboration and consolidation. And I would like to see where that goes. I know the county is taking a leadership role in breaking down silos. And I know staff is working with the city and the county. I would like to see discussions about holding off on public works until the streetlights are at least done. And then do public works. And then look at the affluent roads. At the end of the last year, 2033.
Could I hear from other trustees on that recommendation if there's, interest or appetite? Because I believe on our, so part of what we talked about from process-wise with the LRP is that because it's committee level, we don't take action. And so, I asked that there be, an agenda item on our business meeting where we can sort of officially, if we're gonna recommend, if we're gonna direct staff to make some significant change such as this, that there's a place in, you know, in our business meeting where we take action and it's the will of the entire board, or we have a majority, and then it's documented as far as what's going to happen next. So for this time, I'd like to hear, other, you know, responses, to that proposal, because the other projects are really slated. There is no, we're already committed their phases, and so we're not gonna like not finish the southeast, you know, we're not gonna not do. And so to your point, there are the only things that we could change are things that haven't started yet. Right? So trustee Ursink.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add my 2 cents. You know, we talked a little bit about staff morale. You know, we are definitely underrating the current facilities at the DPW and what those employees have to go to day to day. The DPW facility and their workers, the workers that we have there are really the lifeblood of this community. There's such a huge value that people don't think about on a day-to-day basis because they're so good at what they do. And they do it with so little. This is a project that's been pushed back for years, for decades. And we can't have more reports that say that this is a dangerous situation for not only employees, for the community. It's unsafe for folks working there right now, but it's also unsustainable. It's unsustainable for attracting and retaining employees. We're losing them, and we can't hire for certain positions that are open right now. The time is now to do this project. You know, the time is now to just put our heads down and say, this needs to be done. This says, we've had report after report, we've had 20 reports that say the DPW is in a critical situation, critical phase. It's critical now. It's dangerous. It's beyond dangerous. You've got to do it now because there's going to be violation. We are beyond that point. I get it. The streetlights go out. The streetlights are extremely important for our community. But you know what? DPW and our employees is the most important project that we have right now. We've been through a year of planning, of working with engineers, of working with consultants, of talking and going down this road. If we push it back now, you're no better than the last board that pushed it back, no better than the last board that pushed it back. The time is now to do this. And I think it's absolutely critical for our community to move forward with this project right now, because without it, we're going to lose more employees. There could be an accident. We're going to get fines for violations. It's going to just keep on growing and growing and growing. And if you're just, just sweep it under the rug right now, it's gonna get a hell of a lot worse than the situation we are in now. So I would like personally to keep moving forward with this project, to see this thing through and to work consecutively, to work on the streetlights and to continue the projects that we have on schedule right now. So I would be, I'm not in favor of this proposal from trustee Silver.
Thank you. Trustee Morvaldo?
I share some of both of your concerns. I know that we have a number of projects that we don't have any say in the timeline, and we obviously can't move those. And then we have a number of really important priorities. My preference would be that we really, and I've mentioned this before in another meeting, really, really aggressively pursue any federal dollars, any other money that we can draw down for these projects. We have an opportunity to make improvements, for energy efficiency as we are doing these projects, to bring in union labor to get an additional bump, to think about decarbonizing our buildings and get some more funds. And even if that takes an investment from us to, hire a firm that can help us with proposals or help us find this money. And I know there's still guidance coming down from the federal government that'll still come from the state government, but I do think that we will have additional resources available. And until we exhaust that, I would not want to make plans to move things. Like, I would really like to see what we can accomplish if we can get more resources, because I agree with Trustee Ursink that we don't want to keep pushing these issues out. That's dangerous, but I share Trustee Stokebrand's concern in that, this is expensive for taxpayers. So I think that we are going to have more resources available. I would very much like to find out what those are, and if there's opportunity to fund different projects with TID funding. Like, I don't know, like, we're thinking about public safety, pedestrian improvements on Capitol. Is there a TID that can fund that? I don't know. And people maybe have to look into that, but so like anything we can do to use other dollars that are not our tax levy, I really want to be aggressive in finding that to try and keep this schedule.
Noted. And just to clarify, the LMP is just for bonding, so there might be ways, like, I think that I'm really interested in the Climate Reduction Act and how creative we can be with those. So that solicitation came out, so maybe making out that we'll add that to the list of things to pursue and have a meeting with Representative Moore's office. Trustee Lynn.
Just to kind of piggyback a little bit on that, I feel the position that I'm in from my perspective is we're in a bit of a position where we're stuck. Is it that we are pursuing projects actively to add costs, or were these costs and these projects avoided in the past and now our generation of leadership is stuck with them? And I think it's really more so the latter. I feel like we have been handed these things from past leadership, and I don't mean recent past, I mean long-term past. Most of the things that we're fixing have needed to be fixed. Most of the things that we have an option to fix, or that we have an option to move or shift, we've chosen to move or shift until now. And I think now all of a sudden everything has fallen on our laps. And I think it's an important kind of thing to recognize too, when you look at the future of the village. There is also ongoing at this time a generational shift within the community. Right now, there are a lot of older residents who have lived here their whole lives, living in their homes, and their children, and both literally, such as in my family, or just figuratively younger people of my generation, are starting to move into the village. There's more children in the village, and it's the start of a new generation. And I think if we're going to look at the long-term plan, I think we have an opportunity in this board and in the next couple years of boards to tackle some really big projects and set that next generation of families in the village off on the right foot. Give them a better facility, give them better streetlights that last longer, that are more energy efficient, make those energy efficient improvements to the village. I think if we do that now, if we jump on that now, partially because we have no choice for so many things, but partially because we can, and we can afford it, we can pay for it. I think we have an obligation to do that. So that's my perspective.
Christie, do you have anything?
I'm sort of a kind of a piece of everyone, right? I mean, I very seriously worry about the long-term health of the village when you put together value versus taxes, right? I mean, whether we're talking about the taxes from the village, the taxes from the schools, whatever it happens to be, Shorewood is not unbelievably, but an incredibly expensive place to live. And, we talk all the time about wanting to diversify the community and doing this and doing that, and then, sort of, I think we're showing our values of budgeting. And I'm having a hard time reconciling that with what Jerry said, which is there were so many projects that were pushed down the road for decades. And so, right now, am I willing to push off DPW? No, not right now. But I'm also very cognizant of the fact that, we are looking at double-digit percentage increases in taxes. We're looking at double-digit 20%, percent increases in utilities. I mean, at some point, Shorewood's going to hit this tipping point where it is juice isn't worth the squeeze to live here anymore, right? That the schools are good, but they're not these taxes good, or the community is good, the Oakland Avenue is good, but it's not these taxes good. And I don't want to be part of the generation that's sitting here holding the bag on a really expensive place to live that just isn't worth the money it costs to live here. And so I'm going to be, moving forward, I'm going to be real adamant, as I'm sure all the rest of us are going to be, on finding different opportunities for funding, for revenue, on, making sure that not every bit of these expenditures fall on the backs of residents, because I don't agree respectfully with Trustee Lynn that we can afford all this, right? We haven't, we just had what, 25 more million from the schools. That's gonna have to happen again in 5 years, right? They're gonna come back they've already said they're gonna come back for another 25. Like, these are the big bumps in taxes. And again, I just worry that at some point, someone's gonna say, and some have, but many more will say, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it to live here. I can move to Glendale, I can move somewhere else and have, similar schools and cheaper taxes. And that's when we get in trouble. So that's where I'm at.
I haven't spoken yet, so I'll take the floor and then, we can, wrap things up. So yeah, I appreciate all this discussion, and it is a really, a very interesting place to be, and it's very complex, and it's also pretty exciting because, to everybody's point, we do have the chance to, set some things on the right path. And the really good news is that in the projections, we just see sort of the raw increases. But because we have done, there is growth, that's gonna come online, 2 developments are gonna come right online, and because they're not TID funded, or TID funded. So we have tax increment that's gonna be adding to our tax base. And we continue to look for ways to creatively, increase the tax burden on the commercial district that can offset the tax burden on the residents. So I think that's, but this is LRP talk, so I'm gonna bring it back. And I'm just, when we talk about diversifying revenues and looking at the big picture and the big pie, it's good to keep them in mind that there are these different, factors that play together that can be, if we show leadership in this way and we show leadership in other ways, then that can offset those, spikes that are causing concern in the, plan that we're looking at now. So, Trustee Stubblefield, you had your hand up. I just want to keep in mind time and also that, we may or may not have time to go around again, so.
I just wanted to say, the notion that we possibly delay one of the projects so we don't have so much going on, so many big projects at the same time. We can pick a different project. I guess my point, I have the utmost respect for Public Works. They do a fabulous job. I feel fortunate to live here and have them pick up garbage and everything else they do for us. They're wonderful. I just feel like, when someone comes to you and they're like, we want to go to Disney World and we want the flat screen TV too. And you're like, well, this year we can go to Disney World. Next year, maybe we'll get the flat screen TV. I mean, I just think you have to be realistic about how much you're going to expect the taxpayer to take. It doesn't have to be Public Works. I just felt like street lighting is something we have to do right now because of the safety factor of all the residents. If someone wants to suggest something else that we delay, the other problem that I have with what we could get from the federal government or the state, you're one election away from not getting, I have a hard time doing a long range financial plan, thinking what we might get from another government entity. It's very difficult right now.
Thank you. So, Manager, you want?
I want to thank you for the good discussion. No, really, like this is a win. I think for the group, because this is the type of dialogue and thought that I wanted to hear tonight. All of the perspective, but every time one of you spoke, I thought, oh yeah, I identify with what they're saying. So know that your comments have been heard. To Trustee Stokebrand's point, I do think that watching the legislation, what comes with it is incredibly important. So that's one thing that we can do to kind of perhaps improve on when we look at some of these large movers within the project plan schedule. I do have some guidance that tonight I would like from you to move forward with immediately, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more under special order of business. None of them are new topics for you. The biggest change is whether you want us to start leaning into a 30-year versus a 20-year implementation timeline for the lead service lateral replacement program. And I know that that's not, we've implemented a program, but I can also appreciate that at the time when we implemented it, it was still pretty new. So now we've had a chance to digest a little bit more what that means financially with the numbers. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts on that as well. But in all, I want to thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts tonight. And as I've relayed before, again, these are really tough projects. And I'm grateful that we have a group here who's willing to have dialogue with the best interests of the whole community. That's not every day that you get that. So thank you. And I want to thank George for his hard work in getting acclimated to his first LRP.
Thank you.
Yeah, and since we did touch on different aspects of finance that are not all LRPs, this won't be our first pass at talking creatively, so maybe we can take a note that we wanna, have committee level planning, in the future to come back to some of these more kind of, they're not really policy, but it's sort of just like that big picture, because I think to Trustee Go's point, I mean, keeping it in mind what the value is and what's going on around us. I know at the ICC, there are municipalities that went to referendum for operating this year, so taxes are going up everywhere. We have really old infrastructure, so that's really special for us. But I do think that there's a lot of information out there that we have some committee time in the future, maybe closer as part of budget, and that we may find out really.
Maybe a good opportunity for strategic initiatives.
Oh my goodness. Can I make a motion right now? No, it's a future item. Yeah. All right. So with that, that's all we need to do for this committee, right? All right. So motion to adjourn,
So.
Second.
any objection? We are adjourned at 7:26.